Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are taking on a really difficult subject. It's about an organization built on a foundation of trust and welfare.
And how that trust was, according to our sources, completely shattered.
We're talking about the Army Welfare Housing Organization, or AWHO. It was created to secure the retirement of Indian Army veterans.
But it allegedly became a source of profound betrayal. This is a story about a noble vision that somewhere along the way seems to have devolved into a systemic problem.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Give us the context. AWHO was set up back in 1978.
That's right. It was registered under the Societies Registration Act, and its mission was, crystal clear.
To solve the housing crisis for Army personnel after they finished their service.
Exactly. And the whole thing was built on this one core principle.
No profit, no loss.
Yes, that covenant was the bedrock. It was meant to be a social welfare project, providing dignity and security.
So veterans were funding these projects themselves, believing AWHO was just a transparent manager for their own money.
Precisely. They thought it was their welfare department. But the analysis we're digging into today, AWHO, the tragedy, calls it a broken promise.
It even uses the phrase architecture of disenfranchisement.
Which is an incredibly strong charge. It suggests this isn't just a few mistakes, but a system, a structure that was almost designed to fail the very people it was meant to serve.
So what's our mission for you, the listener, in this deep dive?
It's really two things. First, we need to understand the mechanics, the legal and governance tricks that created what the source calls a state of legal limbo.
A place where veterans are somehow denied the basic rights that every other homebuyer in India gets.
And second, and this is the crucial part, we have to explore the one big solution the analysis proposes. A structural remedy, a democratic fix, to address what it calls institutional rot.
So let's get into that turning point. AWHO starts out with this noble mission. When did things start to go wrong? When did it shift from service to control?
Well, the document doesn't give us a single date. It's more of a gradual strategic shift.
Away from helping veterans and towards what?
Towards centralizing power. It started to operate less like a cooperative service and more like a top-down, powerful developer.
So it's a welfare organization in name only.
In name only. Operationally, it became focused on controlling everything, the information, the contracts, how disputes were handled. It was a monopoly provider shielded by the uniform.
And this control allowed them to systematically deny basic rights. Let's start with the big ones. The constitutional protections.
There are three main pillars here that were just, sidestepped.
Okay, what's the first one?
First is Article 14. That's the right to equality, the right to not be subjected to arbitrary decisions.
I mean, you can't just have random delays or price hikes without justification.
Exactly. A civilian developer would face serious legal penalties for that kind of behavior. Then there's Article 21, the right to a dignified life.
And how does that apply to housing?
Well, the courts have interpreted it broadly. When a veteran's entire retirement security is tied up for years in a delayed or defective home, their right to a dignified life is fundamentally compromised.
And the third one?
Article 300A, the right to property. It means you can't be deprived of your property without due process and transparency. And that's the core issue here, the complete lack of transparency.
It really sounds like they were being treated as a different class of home buyer just because the developer was linked to the military.
That's the argument. But the biggest shield for Indian homebuyers in recent years was RERA.
Right, the Real Estate Act of 2016. That was game changer. This is supposed to bring transparency to the whole industry.
It was. But AWHO, they tried to argue their way out of it.
How did they do that?
By claiming they weren't a commercial promoter in the way RERA defines it. They said, we're a welfare society, so these commercial rules don't apply to us.
Let's break down exactly what RERA protections they're accused of ignoring. This is really key to understanding that legal limbo you mentioned.
Okay, so there are 5 really crucial protections in RERA that AWHO just seemed to bypass.
What's number 1?
Mandatory project registration. Every single project has to be registered with the state RERA authority. That's the gateway to any kind of oversight. AWHO often just didn't do it.
Keeping the projects off the books, regulatorily speaking.
Exactly. Second is transparent cost disclosure and the use of escrow accounts. RERA demands that 70% of the money from buyers goes into a dedicated account for that specific project.
To stop developers from moving money around between projects.
Yes, and AWHO's failure to do this is a huge reason for the financial opacity we're going to talk about.
Okay, what's the third RERA protection?
Fixed completion dates. And if you miss them, you have to pay compensation. It's that simple. AWHO's contracts actively try to write that right out of existence.
And the fourth.
The 5-year defect liability. This is huge. RA makes the developer responsible for fixing structural defects for 5 years after handover.
But AWHO's contracts tried to shift that responsibility onto the veteran much sooner.
Much, much sooner. And finally, number 5 is the simple right to information. RERA is all about transparency, updates on construction, access to approvals. AWHO's secrecy completely violates the spirit of that law.
So outside of real estate law, you also have the Consumer Protection Act. Were veterans able to use that?
They were, but only after a long fight. AWHO's first line of defense in almost every consumer case was to claim that special status again.
We're no profit, no loss, so we're not a service provider under the law.
That was the argument. They tried to deny veterans even the most basic recourse for bad service.
This is where it gets really fascinating and kind of perverse. How do you take the very principle that built your trust, no profit, no loss, and turn it into a shield against the law?
The source calls it the weaponization of welfare. It's a self-serving interpretation. They basically said, we're not commercial, so commercial laws and liabilities don't apply to us.
But if you're really about welfare, why would you fight so hard against transparency and accountability?
That's the central contradiction, isn't it? They weren't afraid of losing a profit they weren't supposed to make.
They were afraid of paying for their mistakes.
Exactly. Paying 15% annual compensation on a 7-year delay, like we'll see in one case, that's a huge financial liability. If they're forced to comply with RERA, they have to maintain those escrow accounts, and that completely changes how they operate.
The audacity of it. The source says they actually filed court petitions asking to be made exempt from these laws.
They did. They went to court and asked for constitutional protection to be placed above consumer law.
But did it work? Did the courts agree with them? This is a really important moment for the listener.
And this is the critical aha moment. The courts have consistently and powerfully rejected AWHO's argument.
So the judiciary saw right through it.
Completely. They recognized that when you're collecting 100% of the cost and managing these massive billion-rupee projects, you're engaging in a commercial activity, regardless of your stated motive.
Can you give us some of the specific rulings?
There's a clear pattern. The Kerala High Court put it bluntly. Welfare status does not reduce responsibility.
Your good intentions don't get you a pass on your legal obligations.
Oh, right. Then the National Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission, the NCDRC, they ruled that no profit status does not exempt from delay liability. If you're late, you pay.
And the Tamil Nadu RERA Authority.
They affirmed the same thing. Welfare status, no defense against statutory rights. So the law is actually settled on this. AWHO has to be held to the same standard as any other developer.
So if they keep losing in court, why does the malpractice continue?
Because the problem isn't the law, it's the governance. And that's where we have to look next.
Okay, so the courts are pushing back, but the system itself doesn't change. This brings us to what the analysis calls the architecture of powerlessness. Let's start with the first pillar, governance by military command structure.
This is so fascinating because AWHO isn't run like a normal company, not like a civilian housing provider.
How's it run?
It operates like an army formation, an extension of the military command structure. Accountability flows up the chain of command, not outwards to the people funding it.
The veterans.
Yes, the actual stakeholders are completely cut out of the loop.
So describe that leadership structure for us. The titles themselves are pretty revealing.
They are. The chairman is the adjutant general, an ex officio position. The managing director is always a serving major general.
So an active duty career officer.
Correct. And the board of governors. It's made up entirely of self-appointed lieutenant generals, army commanders, principal staff officers.
And who are they accountable to?
Only to the chief of army staff, not to a single one of the veteran allies who are paying for everything, 100% of the cost.
That's a massive built-in conflict of interest right there. And what about expertise? Are these generals experts in real estate?
That's the other huge issue. They are experts in military command, in logistics, in warfare. They are not necessarily experts in ARIA compliance, large-scale construction management, or contract law.
And they're not in the job for long, are they?
No, they rotate out every 2 or 3 years, so there's no corporate continuity. Just as an MD might start to understand the scale of the problems, he's transferred, and a new general comes in to inherit the mess.
And the cycle of non-accountability just continues. Okay, let's move to Pillar 2, which really holds this all together. The RTI blackout and financial opacity.
If you want to maintain power, you control the information. And AWHO maintains extreme secrecy.
How do they justify that?
They use a specific legal argument. They claim to be a private society, so they're exempt from the Right to Information Act of 2005.
A private club, basically.
That's the claim. But it's a claim that seems to fall apart when you look at the public subsidies they receive.
What kind of subsidies?
The analysis points out they consistently get government land at highly concessional, way below market rates,
Right.
plus significant tax exemptions.
So they're using public resources, but claiming private status to avoid public scrutiny.
And that's a contradiction that's legally and morally very difficult to defend.
Let's get specific. What information are veterans being denied?
They're completely in the dark. They can't see detailed financial statements, can't see the project cost breakdowns. You have no idea how builders are selected. It's a total black box.
Which means they can't even verify if they've been overcharged.
Exactly. And the most shocking part of this is what the source calls the surplus funds mystery.
A surplus. But there's supposed to be no profit, no loss.
Right. How can a nonprofit have a surplus of 61.52 crore? That's over 615 million rupees.
Where did that money come from?
It was collected from the veterans, but what happened to it is a complete mystery. There's no transparency on whether it was returned, reinvested, or if it ever earned any interest for the allottees.
And the military structure allows them to just hold on to it.
Because the Board of Governors isn't accountable to the members, they can internally decide what to do with that money. They aren't bound by RERA's escrow rules, so they can pool funds, maybe use a surplus from one project to cover the losses or delays of another.
Which is exactly what RERA was designed to prevent.
It's a perfect example of how the lack of transparency hides potential mismanagement. And, of course, the minutes from the Board of Governors meetings. Completely inaccessible.
That is just stunning.
Well,
This leads us right into Pillar 3, the stakeholder paradox.
this really sums up the entire structural flaw. The veterans are in this impossible position.
Let's lay it out.
Okay. Veterans pay 100% of the costs.
They bear 100% of the risk,
They have 0% control over how the organization is run.
and they receive 0% information.
They are investors with all of the liability and none of the power.
And this powerlessness is written directly into their contracts, right? The source mentions 25 statute violations in AWHO's own documents.
Yes, their own marketing materials and handover terms orders are filled with clauses that are, frankly, illegal.
Like what? Give us an example.
The most notorious one is the not legally binding clause.
What does that mean?
It means any promise AWHO made in their beautiful marketing brochures about amenities, quality, completion dates is declared not legally enforceable once you sign the main contract.
So the promises are worthless.
Legally, yes. It's a systematic attempt to create a contractual rights-free zone, getting veterans to sign away their statutory protections by trusting the institution.
So we have this structure of powerlessness, unaccountable governance, total secrecy, and unfair contracts. It's no surprise this leads to failure. And the source has the court records to prove it's a systemic problem.
Yes, the judicial record is damning. It's not just one or two bad projects. It's a pattern, a multi-state crisis. The source identifies 9 proven patterns of malpractice.
Let's run through them quickly.
Okay. First, chronic and unexplained delays. We're talking 1.5 to 7 years.
Second,
Unsafe and defective construction. This isn't just cosmetic, it's structural.
we've covered the one-sided contracts and the misuse of the no-profit shield.
Right. Then there's the failure to provide mandatory compensation and post-construction violations, like not forming the housing societies or handing over the deeds.
It's a failure at every single stage of the process.
Exactly. The courts also found inadequate supervision of contractors, and crucially, they started granting class-wide relief.
Meaning they recognized this wasn't just one person's problem, but a failure affecting everyone in the project.
Yes. The problem was organizational, not individual.
Okay, let's put a face on these failures with some specific cases. The source uses a very strong word for one of them, the catastrophe.
That's the Kochi Chandrakunj Towers case from the Kerala High Court in 2025. This is the ultimate indictment of AWHO's quality control. The court found the problems weren't just bad paint jobs. They were fundamental structural defects. The foundation, the load-bearing walls, fire safety, all compromised. The buildings were unsafe.
So what did the court order?
The most extreme remedy possible: complete demolition and reconstruction.
Demolition. So the entire project, all that money and time, was a total loss because of their negligence.
A total loss. It's a staggering verdict.
What about the issue of delays? That seems to be in almost every project.
For delays, the key case is Coimbatore, Raman Vihar, from the NCDRC in 2023. Massive delays, and AWHO used all the standard excuses, contractor problems, supply chain issues.
But the court didn't buy it.
No, they said AWHO, as the promoter, is responsible for managing those risks. And the crucial part is they ordered 6% delay compensation for all the LATs.
That's that class-wide relief again.
A powerful precedent. They recognized the system failed everyone.
In some cases, the courts went beyond just compensation
Yeah.
and got punitive, right? Like the Panchkula project case.
Yes. Delhi High Court, 2025, delays of up to 3 years. AWHO tried to blame a local mining ban. The court rejected it.
Same penalty.
It was substantial. 8% interest for the delay, plus a 12% penalty interest. That 12% is the court saying your conduct was unacceptable and we're punishing you for it.
And what's the most extreme example of a delay that you've seen?
That has to be the case of LT Kaul and Ajmer Singh. It went all the way to the Supreme Court.
How long was the delay?
A 7-year total delay. 7 years.
Unbelievable.
And the NCDRC, the Consumer Court, condemned AWHO's conduct in that case as below the belt.
Below the belt. That's strong language from a court.
It is. They awarded 15% per annum compensation, and the Supreme Court upheld it. It shows the judiciary's frustration with the institutionalized bad faith.
These court cases really paint a picture of the financial cost. But what about the human cost? This has to be devastating for the veterans and their families.
It's devastating. You have to think about what the source calls temporal loss. It's not just money, it's years of their life.
A retirement they can't get back.
Imagine retiring at 55, expecting your home, and not getting it until you're 62. That window for starting a new chapter is gone. Your savings are gone, spent on rent. For widows, for dependents, this is their only safety net.
And for that net to break, it's more than a financial loss.
It's a moral injury. The feeling that the very institution you dedicated your life to is now exploiting you in your most vulnerable years, that's a psychological burden you can't put a price on.
So this is where we need to shift our focus. We've seen the legal failures, but the courts can only do so much. The source argues that the real problem, the invisible tragedy, is the culture.
Right. This is the why. Why does this keep happening even after all those court losses? And the answer lies in the military culture complex.
What do you mean by that?
Well, think about military training. It's built on obedience, on institutional loyalty. It has to be.
Right.
But that psychological conditioning creates a powerful belief. Doubt equals disloyalty. And that mindset doesn't just switch off when you retire.
So it prevents veterans from questioning AWHO because they see it as an extension of the Army.
Exactly. They fall into what the source calls the loyalty trap, the idea that the Army can do no wrong. So filing a lawsuit against AWHO doesn't feel like a consumer complaint.
It feels like an act of betrayal.
It feels like you're attacking the institution you love. So you accept things, you tolerate delays and defects that any civilian would immediately go to court over.
And this cultural loyalty creates the perfect environment for a power imbalance to grow. The hierarchy of powerlessness.
It's a system designed to protect the people at the very top, the 0.1%.
The protected elite.
Yes. The lieutenant generals on the board of governors, they are both the managers and often alatis themselves.
A huge conflict of interest.
And their interests are always protected. They get the best units. Their issues are resolved instantly. They have access.
And then you have everyone else.
The voiceless majority, the junior ranks, the JCOs, the ORs, the backbone of the Army. These are the people who need this housing the most, and they have the least power.
Can you illustrate what happens when someone from each group files a complaint?
The source documents a hierarchy of grievances. A complaint from a lieutenant general gets immediate action.
How about a colonel?
A complaint from a colonel is noted and filed. It might get looked at eventually.
And a JCO or another rank?
Their complaint is routinely, systematically ignored. The command structure that's meant for the battlefield is being used to silence dissent in a civilian housing project.
Which leads to this I got mine phenomena.
Exactly. The senior officers who get good service, whose problems are solved, they stay silent. They don't see the systemic failure that's hurting the ranks below them.
So there's no solidarity.
No solidarity at all. The silence of the satisfied few ensures that the collective exploitation can continue year after year. It prevents a unified voice from ever emerging to demand real reform.
We've laid out the problem, a broken system enabled by a culture of loyalty and a rigid hierarchy. Individual court cases are just band-aids. So what is the fix? What is the one single remedy the analysis proposes?
The solution has to be as systemic as the problem. It has to be structural. The only way forward is the mandatory conversion of AWHO into a multi-state cooperative society.
Okay, unpack that. How does making it a cooperative society solve the core issues?
Because cooperative law is designed from the ground up to fix every single one of AWHO's flaws, it fundamentally changes the power dynamic.
So how does it address Pillar 1, the military governance?
It replaces military hierarchy with democratic control. The rule becomes one member, one vote. A general's vote is worth the same as a junior soldier's.
So the Board of Governors, all those self-appointed generals, they're gone.
They're gone. Replaced by an elected managing committee made up of veteran representatives who are directly accountable to the members. If they mess up, they can be voted out.
And the MD, the Major General.
He's replaced by a professional manager, a CEO, who answers to that elected board.
Okay, so that fixes the governance. What about Pillar 2, the financial secrecy?
Cooperative law mandates financial transparency. It becomes a legal requirement. There would be mandatory external audits reviewed by the cooperative registrar. The RTI blackout ends overnight.
So the surplus funds mystery would finally be solved.
It would have to be. All the books would be open to the members.
And Pillar 3, the unfair contracts and dispute resolution.
Cooperatives have built-in dispute resolution mechanisms. There are dedicated cooperative courts, which are often faster and more specialized. It creates an internal, fair path for justice.
This sounds like a complete institutional revolution, but is it actually possible? Is there any precedent for forcing a military-linked organization to become democracy?
Yes, there is, and it's a critical case study. Salunki Vihar in Pune.
What happened there?
The state authorities in Maharashtra actually forced the project to register as a cooperative society. They mandated the democratic conversion.
And how did AWHO react?
They fought it tooth and nail. They launched a fierce, long legal battle to stop it.
Which proves the point of the analysis.
It's the perfect proof. Democracy works. That's why they fear it. They were terrified of losing that unilateral control.
But the conversion went through.
It did.
Yeah.
And the result was better management, more transparency, and control was finally handed over to the people who paid for the homes.
So how can this be done for all of AWHO across the country? What's the legal strategy?
The legal path is there. It rests on the constitutional right to form associations, and also on the fact that AWHO already calls itself a society. That gives the cooperative authorities jurisdiction.
So what's the first step? The single most important action?
The analysis recommends a direct, comprehensive petition to the multi-state cooperative societies registrar.
Demanding what?
Demanding compulsory registration of the entire AWHO organization. This would likely be supported by a public interest litigation, a PIL, in the Supreme Court, using all of those court cases as evidence that the current structure is fundamentally broken and incapable of reform.
So the goal is to stop fighting these small battles over compensation.
And win the war over governance. To move from seeking relief for past failures to mandating a structure that prevents future ones.
A permanent democratic fix.
That's the only complete remedy.
So, to wrap this up, our deep dive into AWHO. The tragedy shows a really painful picture. An organization that, it seems, used the loyalty and hierarchy of the military to protect itself from the rules everyone else has to follow.
And that led to the systemic exploitation of the very people it was supposed to protect.
The core insight here, I think, goes beyond just the legal cases. It's about that broken covenant.
It's a profound moral injury. These veterans, they paid the price of service twice, first on the battlefield and then again in retirement when they were expecting security, and instead found themselves completely powerless.
And the solution isn't some complex new law. It's actually very simple.
It's democracy, the cooperative model. It's the only way to guarantee the transparency and accountability that these veterans have earned and deserve.
It does make you wonder, though, if this kind of thing can happen in AWHO, which is just about housing, what other invisible tragedies might be out there?
And that is the final provocative thought you should leave with. The problem here may not just be AWHO. It could be a broader democracy deficit in military institutions that handle welfare.
You mean other organizations run with the same top-down, non-accountable structure?
Think about it. What about the organization that runs Veterans Healthcare, ECHS, or the Canteen Stores Department? If they operate under a similar model where the leadership answers only to the military chain of command and not to the members,
then they could be vulnerable to the same kinds of failures.
The AWHO case could be a test case, a warning shot. It demands that we look at all veteran welfare bodies and ask a simple question. Who are you accountable to?
We encourage you to explore these ideas further. Look into cooperative law and compare this structure to how other countries handle veteran welfare, like the systems in the US or the UK. It's a powerful lesson in how essential democratic oversight is to protect those who have served.
Honor and rights have to go hand in hand.
An incredibly important and detailed analysis. Thank you for walking us through it.